Gather around the campfire, boys and girls, because crazy Uncle Mark's got a story for you. Here on Classic Game Room as I break in the new microphone. How's it sound? Is everyone excited for the new season starting on January 1st, 2024? I hope so, because it's about to rock you like a blizzurricane from the future in space at the new Intergalactic Space Arcade. Let me tell you about one of my favorite game consoles, the PlayStation 2. I love the PS2. Everybody loved the PS2. I got mine in, I think, 2000, maybe early 2001, but I think it was 2000. And the games that I remember wasting most of my life on at that time were Timesplitters, one of the best games ever made, Red Faction, another one of the best video games ever made, Grand Theft Auto 3 just blew my mind, Gran Turismo 3, Gran Turismo 4, probably my favorite installment in the series, and then, of course, you know the next one, Vice City. Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Like, every time I hear Flock of Seagulls, I feel the need to just drive a car into the shopping mall or run around the beach with a sword. I love Vice City, and I love the PlayStation 2. It was always a lot of fun over the years to review PS2 games because there's a lot of them, and like they're all over the place. It was a very cool era in video games. Like, you had big budget shooters like Killzone and whatnot. You had a lot of spaceship games, a ton of driving games, and everything in between. God of War. So many cool games on the PS2. And of course I reviewed a whole lot of them. So enjoy the first collection here, because you know there'll be more of these. This is Best PlayStation 2 Reviews Volume 1 by Classic Game Room. Enjoy. Released in 2005 for the Japanese PlayStation 2 from Software and Banpresto, this is A.C.E, Another Centuries episode. If you like robots, missiles, and machine guns, especially Gundam, you're gonna love this. And hey, if you think the game looks good, now check out the packaging. Yeah, this is something else, and I've got a huge Classic Game Room shout out and thank you to send to Michael from Euless, Texas. I think that's how you pronounce it. Thank you, Michael, for sending the first 2 Ace games and a bunch of Gundam manga. Check out these beautiful cards that come in the box set, fit for framing. These look even better in person. And Michael wanted a shout out sent to Generation X Comics and Games in Bedford, Texas. So, thank you to everyone for giant robots with lasers and missiles that fly in space and punch other robots with laser swords. Because they're cool. This is a pretty solid game. That's a lot of fun. There's an enormous amount of mechs to collect in Another Centuries episode, which is basically a mashup of a bunch of different robot anime series, including some Gundam. I'm not all that familiar with Gundam, but it certainly looks really cool. Sadly, this was never released to the West, so there is a bit of a language barrier. I highly recommend, if you're going to play this one and you don't read Japanese, to go with an internet walkthrough. You can get by. As you can see, the menus are in Japanese, so if you don't know what you're doing, the upgrading path can be a bit tricky. But once you get the hang of it, it's no problem. The combat reminds me a lot of Zone of the Enders. The camera controls are reversed for right and left. I'm not sure if there's a way to invert that since I can't read the menus. And you go up and down with the R1 and the R2 button, but most of your weapons will auto-target and even automatically switch for you, depending on how close you are to the enemies. If you're super close, it'll pull out a sword or try to punch them in the face. At a distance, it'll launch missiles.
There's a wide variety of robots or mechs or mobile suits to choose from. Those of you more familiar with the anime will probably appreciate that aspect a lot more. I just think they all look super cool. Here's where an internet walkthrough comes in handy, because you can upgrade your carrier with new slots for adding new robots, and you can also upgrade each of your robots or your mechs independently and upgrade their weapons. The missions are for the most part pretty straightforward. If you get stuck, a walkthrough certainly helps. But normally you just have to destroy everything, or fight an end boss, or follow the little red arrow to something. If you've played a lot of video games, you shouldn't have a problem figuring it out. I think the production values are spectacular. This looks great on the PlayStation 2, and the music is really good. I also like the menu music a lot. I got stuck on this mission. I couldn't figure out why I kept losing, but apparently you have to lure the enemies away from the buildings before you destroy them with your giant laser sword, naturally. I mean, that's just common sense, really. There's a nice variety of missions and environments, and obviously a lot of robots to unlock. I haven't quite finished the game yet, it's pretty big, but as I understand it, when you do, you unlock free play, and then you can go back and play the missions again. And there's a bunch of secret conditions that you can obviously find online. If you can complete them, you'll unlock even more robots. But let me stress that it looks amazing, but the controls are a bit of an acquired taste. It's not quite as playable as it looks. I haven't fired up any of the sequels yet. I know there's an A.C.E game on PlayStation 3, and I after playing this, I immediately ordered A.C.E Macross on PSP, which is really cheap. Don't know if it's good yet, but there's a bunch of sequels. Hopefully they fix the camera controls later on. Or at least modernized them. The up and down with the R1 and R2 just feels weird. Beyond the obvious amazing style, the highlight of the game is figuring out which robots do what the best for which missions. And I will forewarn you, some of the missions are downright tricky to figure out, especially if you can't read the language. And I have no idea what's going on in the storyline, but it's fun to watch. Thankfully, this game isn't all that expensive online, but you will need a Japanese PS2 or a way to play Japanese PlayStation 2 games to enjoy it. It's A.C.E! Another Centuries episode. Thanks again, Michael. I'll see you in the sequel.
Yes.
I've lost track of the time that I've spent playing Timesplitters. Fortunately, the game keeps track of it for you. It's a lot, more than I'm willing to admit. I think that Timesplitters is the most underrated series of shooters ever created. Originally developed by Free Radical, released in 2000, published by Eidos for the PlayStation 2. The most recent one was Timesplitters Future Perfect, published by EA. And since then, we have been hoping, desperately, all of us Timesplitters fans, wishing for a new one. Timesplitters came from some of the original talent behind GoldenEye. It plays very similar. It's super smooth and absolutely fast and ferocious on the PlayStation 2. There's 3 different Timesplitters games. This is the first one from 2000. Timesplitters games also came out for GameCube and Xbox. I forget which ones are on which consoles, maybe all of them. But they're super affordable and easy to find today, and they're a blast to play. They're so much fun. The storyline mode of the game is extremely simple. You go into an environment, shoot all of the enemies, grab a bag, and then all of the time splitters appear and make your life difficult as you try to get out of the environment. That's the basic game, but where this thing really shines is in multiplayer, with a host of wacky characters that you won't find in any other violent shooter. The single-player games are actually quite challenging, and the controls are fairly standard for most first-person shooters. The game has just a bit of auto-aim to make it really smooth, but not so much that it's ridiculously easy. In fact, this is a challenging game. It's the kind of game that has health packs, not regenerating shields or energy. It would be preposterous to think that a duck running around shooting people could just regenerate health. That's just silly. Single player's fun, but let's set up some multiplayer. Me versus old friend, the same ex-roommate who battled me in the Bushido Blade review and NCAA 10. We're on equal footing for this game, so it's pretty much mass chaos whenever we play. We'll put some bots in the game. My screen is on the bottom, his screen is on the top. Enjoy the names. This game would be great even without the sounds, but the cacophony of ridiculous sound effects makes Timesplitters stand out just in the audio department. The Western ricochet sound, the awesome techno-style music, and the bizarre selection of screaming from various characters, monsters, undead, zombies, and animals. Good stuff. And I could talk about the levels all week. Some of the best multiplayer boards ever created, like Streets, Docks, and this one here. In fact, I was upset that some of these did not even return for the newer Timesplitters in 2005. Although you could sort of make them. There's a level creation tool in Timesplitters. And we did make some of the older ones for Future Perfect. Proximity mines. When given the chance, who didn't just litter the entire playing field with proximity mines? You were guaranteed several kills. What's amazing about the first Timesplitters is how smooth and playable it is, even when the entire board is full of enemies. This game never skips a beat. It feels light on its feet at all times. I recently played through the first Killzone on PlayStation 2, which is an excellent game, but it feels like it's really dragging the PlayStation down. It doesn't feel nearly as fast and responsive as Timesplitters. After spending a lot of time playing games like Halo 3 and Resistance and Call of Duty and Far Cry and all kinds of other shooters on the newer consoles, going back to Timesplitters just seems normal. It doesn't feel dated at all, at least to me. It does not seem like a game that's a decade old. It may not have the detail and color of some of the newer titles out there, but the controls are every bit as fast, responsive, and good. And Timesplitters is generally more fun than most shooters. It depends on what you like. I mean, you can do all the stuff like headshots and strategy and camping and tactics and whatever in Timesplitters. But when you're being chased by a robotic fishbowl with laser beams, it's something special. It's Timesplitters. I've mentioned this in other reviews, but one of my favorite parts of this series is the health packs. When you wound somebody, if you're playing some friends and you shoot one of them but they don't die and you do, when you come back and respawn, you go right for them because you know they don't regenerate their health. They've got to find a health pack before you find them. Getting on a killing spree in this game is not terribly easy until you learn all of the levels and know where the health packs are. But even then, when you fill the entire board with enemies, nothing about this game is easy. Hey, I pulled that one off by 2 kills. Good job, me, Tron. Speaking of movies, you know they even featured Timesplitters in Shaun of the Dead. Now if that doesn't justify you playing Timesplitters, I don't know what does. Chinese restaurant, this is my board. Yes, it's fair to say that Timesplitters and Red Faction are my 2 favorite shooters on the PlayStation 2 by a wide margin. I really hope that this series makes a strong return. I think it's time for a new Timesplitters. Robofish must be getting lonely. Not a good showing on my self-proclaimed my board, but it's my review show and I control the editing. The ending of the review shall be mine. R109 is victorious again.
Oh yeah.
The following review has been approved by Lord Carnage and the best of classic game room. It's Giga Generations for the PlayStation 2. The Giga series has consistently been one of my favorite vertical scrolling spaceship style shooter series out there. I played and reviewed the first 2 games for the Sega Dreamcast. They're incredible. This one is not quite as incredible. I'll get that out of the way early. It's not as good as the first 2 games. But still worth playing if you're a fan of the series and the genre. If you can find it for a good price, it's actually gotten pretty expensive out there. I'm playing the Japanese version of the game on my Japanese PlayStation 2. We've got 4 spaceships to choose from, each with different speeds and shot patterns. I think this was released in Europe, although I'm not entirely sure. I don't believe it came to the US. What makes it a Giga game, in addition to the insane scoring, you'll rack up points in the bajillions, which isn't even a real number. You charge up your ship and bounce the enemy shots back into their face, dropping medals and scoring huge points into the bajillions. The more medals you collect, the higher your multiplier, so it's in your best interest to shoot as many things as possible and collect those precious medals, but beware, this is a bullet hell style shooter. The screen quickly fills with bullets
that are all trying to kill you. Which is why charging up your ship is so handy, because that makes you temporarily invincible. And that means you can just charge into enemies, pound them with lasers, and collect those delicious gold medals afterwards. Managing your special charging power is pretty much the key to the entire game, because you don't want to get into a tough situation without it. By level 4 you'll have no choice, as you're hammered with endless bullet hell shot patterns. And there's one more after that, making 5 levels total. It's a fun game, however it just happens to follow on the heels of 2 of my favorite Dreamcast games. So my expectations were probably unrealistically high going into this one. Also, the PS2 is an inferior piece of hardware compared to the Dreamcast. That's right, I said it, but you know I'm a Sega fanboy. I'm also a Gigawing fanboy. So I'm picky. The music's not as good as the first 2 games, the level design and visuals aren't as good. This is like ordering pizza from that place down the street that's not quite as good as your favorite pizza shop, but you're trying something different and it shows up and they forgot the pepperoni. It's a little greasier than you like it to be, but it's still pizza and you're hungry. That's Gigawing Generations. I didn't get a chance to mess around with it, but you can play 2 players simultaneously with a friend on screen at the same time, and there's a tag team mode. You can also adjust all of the difficulty and player stock settings, and the 4 ships really mix up the gameplay in the different ways that you can enjoy Gigawing Generations. So don't take my critical comments here as saying this is a bad game and you shouldn't buy it, but make it the last of the 3 Gigawing games that you buy. After you waste the end boss at the end of each level, that's when you score the really big bonus points. Obviously the game saves your high score, and frankly I've had a great time with Gigawing Generations. I don't regret buying it at all. And if you're a fan of the Gigawing series, I think you'll like this one, but you'll probably feel the same way that I do. There's just something missing here, in addition to the fact that it's not on the Dreamcast. Like a lot of these games, I find it's best not to move around a whole lot. That reduces the risk of flying into some enemy laser fire. Also, if your eyes are tired, it's tough to tell the difference between the medals that you're supposed to collect and the enemy shots that you're most definitely not. It's Gigawing Generations. When do we get another one? Get this series back on the Dreamcast.
Hello, we bring you breaking news. It's just beyond belief.
This is live from Rome! The city is under attack by a towering humanoid weapon, which suddenly appeared out of nowhere. The weapon appears to be attacking indiscriminately. The city is burning. It's unbelievable. It's like something from out of a movie. Oh, something shot out of it. It blew a building apart. It's simply incredible. The Eternal City is fast becoming a blazing ruin. This isn't a movie. This is real. This is reality.
I think I spent 95% of the time I was playing this game laughing and just enjoying the dialogue. Robot Alchemic Drive. I see the Sandlot logo on this game. I've also seen it on Earth Defense Force. 2017, one of the greatest video games ever made. Those who like EDF and the Godzilla movies and giant robot cartoons from the 80s, Voltron, Tranzor Z, you know what I'm talking about. You'll get a kick out of the style in Robot Alchemic Drive. It's not nearly as playable as Earth Defense Force 2017. In fact, the gameplay is quite clunky and slow and cumbersome, just like controlling a giant robot, which you'll see. But man, the dialogue and the storyline are just fucking great.
The Bulgara has fired its thermal cannon, and its power is awesome. We can feel its heat, even here. Does humankind stand a chance against this horrifying foe?
A new humanoid weapon has appeared on our shores.
The new robot appears to be fitted with drills on its arms. Could they be devastating new weapons?
Theoretically, it's perfect. But the world doesn't run on theory alone.
You mean...
Money.
Huh?
It makes the world go round. Money. Cash. Moolah.
Who are you?
Oh, when will people learn? You can run off to the sides, scatter off the road. You see, the robots aren't very fast. They're not very smart either, but they are cool looking. Let's see, the storyline has some nonsense about a nectar barrier preventing humans from having space travel. It rewrites history, and like nothing can travel through space, but these Vulgara monsters, robot things, can fly through space because, you know what, it doesn't matter. As long as the story has giant robots and completely mangled English dialogue, it's going to be entertaining. And this game has flamethrowers attached to giant robots. Robot Alchemic Drive for the PlayStation 2 was donated to Classic Game Room by Cameron from Columbus, Ohio. Go Blue Jackets! Thank you, Cameron. This one's been entertaining. I've never played a game quite like this one. It's interesting because you know how a lot of people describe like action games now like a third-person shooter, where the camera is behind the character that you're playing, and you know you're sort of witnessing them from just slightly behind them. Like I said, this game is like a fourth-person shooter. You're the guy behind the giant monster robot. You don't just control these robots; you control the character. Press the select button, and then it's like you're using a remote control to control the robot. So you can ride on the robot's shoulder, or preferably levitate up to a tall building nearby and watch the battle from a distance.
Look over there!
The controls to play this game may be the most awkward controls I've ever seen. This is not one that you're just going to dive into and start playing right away.
Oh, a new humanoid weapon has appeared. It is the same robot that has already saved Japan several times. Has it appeared again to protect Senjo?
Now, I'm standing on top of a building controlling this thing from a distance, so sometimes the controls are in reverse, depending on what direction he's actually pointing. You don't just walk using the analog stick, you move the robot's feet using the L1 and R1 buttons on your PlayStation 2 controller. So you push L1, then R1, then L1, then R1. To turn, you hold down R1 and R2, or L1 and L2. To swing your arms, you use the analog control sticks, and the rest of the buttons shoot things and fire things. It's pretty ridiculous, and just extremely creative and interesting. And the game also has a very stop and start kind of feel. There's lots of dialogue. Fortunately, the dialogue is the best part. There's a never-ending supply of robots attacking Japan. Eventually you start earning money for destroying them and making modifications to your giant robot.
that's tough. I got knocked off the robot's shoulder. Fortunately, it didn't fall on me. Now I'm stuck controlling him from down here, but I'm going to win this battle because I'm using my arm drill. The battles become far more challenging as you play through the game, as you might imagine, once the enemies start shooting you with laser beams and things.
What are you doing? You have to get out of here now!
But I have to go get it!
There's no time for that!
Hey, there's a bridge in my way. How do I get around this? Oh, sorry. My bad. I guess I just didn't care. Robots, Alchemic Drive. It may not be the most playable game out there, but it sure is interesting. I like his jacket. I'm going to have to find one of those. As well as a giant robot to control. Boy, that'd be fun for a day.
Robot killed Grandma. But this robot, I don't understand.
Is this about the burnt nachos? I told you, that's the way they're supposed to look. Don't leave me out here.
We aren't doing anything. I know what it looks like, but we were having a meeting. And there was this noise out in the hallway. Grenade!
Welcome to Classic Game Room. The original Red Faction, released in 2001, is one of my favorite video games ever created, definitely one of the best first-person shooters, and in 2002, when the sequel was released, I was disappointed. But since then, I've changed my mind. Is it because I found the cheat code so I can do this? Which never gets old. Is it the power of Geomod technology? Is it because they just don't make games like this anymore? Or has enough time passed that I'm just not expecting a clone of Red Faction 1? Well, let's find out in the review of Red Faction 2 for the PlayStation 2.
Ooh, visitor, visitor. I'm safe down here.
It's not very often that I change my mind so drastically, but I was extremely disappointed when I first purchased Red Faction 2 in 2002 when it was new, and the fact is, time has done this game a lot of good for all of the reasons I mentioned. They don't make games like this anymore.
Do not run on the platform.
Most games these days throw sense of humor out the window in favor of multiplayer and a false sense of hardcoredness. The Geomod technology rocks, and when I picked this game up and played it a decade later, I was not expecting a clone of Red Faction 1.
Your safety is our concern. Please mind the gap.
This has a different style. It's a different game. It's Red Faction 2, which is, to be clear, not as good as Red Faction 1, but it's still awesome. However, after the masterpiece of Red Faction 1, it's easy to see where I was turned off after the first couple levels in this game, which really aren't that good. Red Faction 2 is one of these games that doesn't really pick up the pace and get its style until about halfway through the game. And that's kind of opposite of most games these days. You usually get a lot of the good stuff up front, and then it feels repetitive and boring later in the game, as you have that annoying 5-hour slug through all the hardest enemies of the game until you get to the end boss through a giant tunnel or something. Not with Red Faction 2. This game will keep you on your toes and gets extremely difficult in the last several levels, but also manages to keep you laughing the entire time, and that's one of its key selling points.
I command you to surrender!
It's hysterical. I feel like I betrayed myself 10 years ago. But this time around, I gave the game more of a chance. The first couple levels are a bit sloppy. The first level is downright terrible, it's easy to get lost in the sewers, and most of the visuals are kind of dark and muddy. But once you get through the sewers, and through the train bridge and the tank level, Red Faction 2 becomes Red Faction worthy.
Must you do things the hard way, Alice?
The game has the voices of Jason Statham and Lance Henriksen, and even though the plot is ridiculous, you'll want to keep playing because it's just downright fun. Now, they don't use the Geomod technology as well in this game as they do in the first one. Yes, you can blow your way through some walls here and there, but frequently it's not clear when you're supposed to do that. They didn't use the Geomod as well as they could have, but it's nice to see they've kept it around for the other games, Red Faction Guerrilla and Red Faction Armageddon.
Shot.
Red Faction 2 is from THQ and Volition, the same people who bring you games like Saints Row 3. And it kind of goes without saying that it's nice to see that humor and outrageous gameplay continues to live on in their work.
Great work, guys. Remember, the Red Faction is behind you. Echo, make yourself useful. Shut up.
See that shot?
Quit bragging, keep firing!
What's surprising is that THQ hasn't given Red Faction and Red Faction 2 the re-release HD treatment like a lot of other games such as the Devil May Cry series, God of War, and Metal Gear Solid. They're easily good enough to warrant remastering and replaying. And if you still have your PlayStation 2 and a couple bucks handy, you can pick up both games really cheap these days, and they're some of the best first-person shooters that you'll ever play. In addition to just being funny, Red Faction 2 has a great single-player campaign, packs a lot of challenge. There's loads of weapons, and it even has local multiplayer, so you can blow your friends up. Red Faction 2 is a really fun game with a great single-player campaign, something so many games are missing these days. I highly, highly recommend it. Even if I wouldn't have 10 years ago. This review has been approved by Lord Carnage. Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything.
That was weird. Welcome to Classic Game Room for the review of Demolition Girl, and you're welcome, because I played this game so you don't have to. Alright, here's the plot. Pretty girl out on the beach taking pictures, stung by an alien crab thing, turns you into a giant, huge woman that's crushing cities in a bathing suit, like Godzilla in a bikini. Or the girl from Monsters vs. Aliens. The difference here is that this isn't good at all. In fact, it's one of the worst games I've ever played. Demolition Girl was made for you to watch in a 5-minute video review, because trust me, you don't want to play it. Watch me endure the horror. Okay, so the game is silly. It's meant to be ridiculous. Your first mission involves you flying a helicopter around said giant woman, collecting her measurements. And I'm currently engaged in buttocks data acquisition. Alright, now that I know what kind of giant dress to get her, we're all set. The biggest problem with Demolition Girl that's probably not apparent from watching it on screen is that it plays terribly. This has the worst controls imaginable. They just don't even make sense. Flying the helicopter is nearly impossible. And everything else is just as bad. How did they mess up a game where you launch giant pieces of cake at enormous alien women? Like, how do you screw that up? After you shoot her in the giant ass with enough tranquilizer darts, she eventually falls over and is picked up by helicopters and transported somewhere else. But on her voyage, she's attacked by alien squids, of course. And your job is to blow them up now using a jet fighter, which you think would be easier to control than the helicopter, right? No, not so much. Terrible controls. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Some of the worst. In fact, I think they are the worst I've ever seen. I was kind of hoping this game would be so bad that it's good, but it's actually so bad that it's worth avoiding. Now, if you think it can't get any worse, it does. Let's take a look at the tank mission, where the giant woman attacking the city poses very little threat. It's oncoming traffic that can destroy your tank. So the way that you get through the mission is by destroying the exact same people that you're trying to save by blowing up their cars so they don't run into you. Just let her rampage. I mean, she's cool. Whatever. She's out to party. I don't know what else to say. It's a good chuckle, but Demolition Girl feels like a game they started to make and then quit halfway through when they realized it wasn't any good or they weren't going to sell any. Good packaging art. But it's definitely one to avoid. However, I do have to thank Christoph from Arnstadt, Germany for sending this to the show. Packed in a box filled with amazing games like Global Defense Force, Monster Attack, and Robot Warlords. I guess I'm a sucker for the game that has a picture of a giant girl and jet fighters on the front of it though, so I played this one first. This is the first PlayStation 2 game being reviewed on Classic Game Room using our new PAL PlayStation 2 sent to the show by Robert in Middlesbrough, United Kingdom. I'll do a full review of it soon and get you up there on the map, Robert. But now I can play PAL games. Ho ho ho, like Global Defense Force. Watch for that review soon. And just avoid Demolition Girl. You don't want her sitting on you. Brought to you by Lord Carnage and the best of Classic Game Room.
Enemy destroyed. Thank you very much.
That sound never gets old. It's Mobile Suit Gundam Federation vs. Zeon on the PlayStation 2 from 2001.
Almost finished. Mission complete.
Based on the classic anime, many of you watch it. You know, I never found a great entry point into Gundam until I started reading the manga, which I'll show you here. It's a great book. By now, Gundam spans... I have no idea how many anime series and books and video games, but there's a whole lot of it. And I've heard mixed opinions about this game, which is a pretty early action game on the PlayStation 2, and it looks and feels like it, but there's a lot to like. Starting with the music. Love the music. I'm assuming that's from the anime, I don't know, but it's good though. I love the disco influence.
What are you doing? If you take any more hits, we're finished!
What I'm trying to do is figure out these controls. They're a bit antiquated, but once you get used to them, Gundam Federation vs. Zeon is an enjoyable PS2 game. It's really cheap to collect these days as well. Assuming, of course, you like destroying things with giant robots as much as I do. Did you know that? I like destroying things with giant robots like it's a surprise. Mark likes disco and robots? No way. It's true. I also like the sound. What is that? Does this game have Voltron? It should. Beyond the bare bones menus, we get some gameplay options, including arcade mode versus and campaign. What we're looking at here is the arcade mode, where you're trying to get through as many enemies as quickly as possible. And the campaign mode is where you choose a side and play through the storyline. There's land scenes and space scenes, and while the gameplay is not as good as something like A.C.E, Another Century's episode, which I just reviewed, it's still entertaining, even if it feels a bit rough around the edges, this being an earlier PS2 release and all. You can't just rotate the camera around you like you can in a lot of modern action games. Instead, you can easily lock onto enemies and shoot them with your equipped weapon, or try to stab them with a laser sword, in the head, preferably. Although I kinda like this guy with the tank treads, which reminds me of one of those like nameless, faceless background characters in Robotech that would get destroyed when Rick was wasting time flirting with Min-Min. My bad, should I have been doing something? You know, I've seen a lot of Robotech and Macross and other anime and stuff, but where do you start with Gundam? Seriously, I'm asking, I don't actually know. I have played a couple Gundam games by now over the years. One of the fighting games was really good. My favorite has got to be the Gundam Dynasty Warriors mashup. Because, well, I mean, who doesn't love Dynasty Warriors? Did they ever make a Gundam kart racing game yet? They should. Everything needs a kart racing game. And guess what? I have a giant mobile suit-sized shout-out and thank you to send to Nate from Long Beach, California, who sent Mobile Suit Gundam Federation vs. Zeon to the show, along with a real Gundam. They're way smaller in person than I thought they were. And they require assembly? Seriously? How effective can these things be in combat when they don't even build themselves? I'm currently playing my way through the Bad Guy campaign, and I was all set to record the line, this game costs only a couple bucks online, and until I just searched for it, and sure enough, it actually holds its value. This one's kind of pricey. I haven't played enough of the other Gundam games to compare it, but it is a decent action game. I'm not sure it's worth 70 or 80 bucks though. In fact, I probably would not recommend paying that much for it, unless you're like Gundam Superfan #1. I do have plans to build the robot Nate, thank you for sending that, and then he'll fight RoboCop to the death. Don't forget there's a 2-player mode in here, which I didn't get a chance to play, but it's there. Invite a friend, play Gundam. Enjoy the campaign and rock out to the incredible music. It's Mobile Suit Gundam Federation versus RoboCop. Wait, oh, Zeon, sorry. They need to make that game. Stay out of trouble. Apparently, some automated robot sentry patrolling YouTube decides what reviews can and can't use music from the game, even if the music is a key part of the game, and was reviewed as journalism. Well, take my word for it. The Snoop Dogg song about Gran Turismo 3 in the background that you can't hear anymore is very good. And this game continues to be good well into the future. It's Gran Turismo 3. And this review was originally recorded in 2009, but apparently there's this huge, awesome replay sequence here at the beginning that I don't want to cut out, so I'm just going to talk over it for a minute here. And then I'll hand you back over to 2009 Mark, who had less white hair than future Mark. This was like 1,000 years ago. And I played the hell out of this game when it was new. Back when I recorded this in 2009, it was done in this corner of my basement, and I think I ran this footage through a Betacam SP machine, which is a professional Betacam player that weighs about 50 pounds. So that was fun to lug around. This was way before I could just record all my footage at 1080p on a laptop, and thankfully I had my old PS2 memory card. In fact, I still have it, and just used a bunch of the cars I'd collected over the years. Enjoy the review and past Mark. Gran Turismo number 3 is regarded by many as the best in the Gran Turismo series. And I'm inclined to agree with that because it's the last one that was simple. While they improved many things in Gran Turismo 4 by adding in more cars and more tracks, and the 1080i high definition, the simplicity of GT3, along with the extremely fun gameplay, makes this one of the best video games ever made. When they started getting more complicated and moving away from the simplicity with the menus and the car modifications and the race layouts, they started to take focus away from fun. Gran Turismo 3 is the most fun of the Gran Turismo games. Gran Turismo 4 might be my personal favorite just because I really appreciate the detail that went into the courses and the graphics and the cars. GT3 kept the focus on the fun and the gameplay. GT4 is the beginning of where we're at now, which is the Gran Turismo 5 prologue. Where's the full thing? It's 2009. I love the Gran Turismo series. It's my favorite video game series of all time. And revisiting Gran Turismo 3 for the first time in a few years reminds me of why I loved this series to begin with. Collecting cars, racing fast, modifying cars, feeling the changes, hopping from race to race with different cars, being able to blow away Honda Civics with an F1 car if you want. And I feel like the Gran Turismo series has gone to an obsession with detail rather than emphasizing fun gameplay. It's as if they're trying to appeal to the 1% of the audience that wants ultra realism. But moving beyond my deep philosophical discussion with why I love Gran Turismo and why I'm so confused as to why I'm not playing Gran Turismo 5 yet, which really should have been released in 2006, Gran Turismo 3 can be had for $1 or $2 now for the PlayStation 2. It has the majority of the excellent tracks that us GT fans love. I forgot that the high speed ring is actually not in this game. But Trial Mountain, Deep Forest, Grand Valley, they're in here and they look wonderful. This game has aged quite well, looks great, sounds great, has some awesome music in there like Snoop Dogg, The Cult, Power Man 5000, and Goldfinger. I love the car selection, and although it's missing some of my favorites, like the Ferraris and Lamborghinis, there's still so many to choose from in this game. The race structure and layout is very similar to what you find in Gran Turismo 1 and Gran Turismo 2. They really got away from it with Gran Turismo 5 Prologue, which is a technical masterpiece, but it's as if they got away from the heart of the game. Just look at these menus. These are the races that you have in Gran Turismo 3. There's beginner races, amateur races, professional races, rally races, and endurance races, and a lot of them. They're a lot of fun to go through and win each of them. It doesn't seem like a series of frustrating time trials. If I want to race time trials, I'll play Gran Turismo 4 because that's the best part of Gran Turismo 4. But even in that game, they started spreading the races out all over the place, and while I have not played Gran Turismo 5, the full version, yet, it has the potential to be the best video game ever made. Because the thing about Gran Turismo is it's about a lot of cars, it's about a lot of courses, it's about collecting a garage full of different vehicles and being able to race them with relative freedom in the different races. I don't want to have to wait through 10 seconds of animation and soft jazz before I can get to a car selection. I want this, but optimized with the newest technology. I've said since they launched the PlayStation 3, the biggest mistake they could have made was not having a Gran Turismo game ready. In my opinion, all they would have needed to do was re-release Gran Turismo 4 as Gran Turismo 5 with some improved graphics and some new courses, and then made Gran Turismo 6 whatever masterpiece they're supposedly working on. But in conclusion, if you have not played the PlayStation 2 Gran Turismo games, GT3 and GT4 are two of the best games ever made. And this one in particular is a great place to start your Gran Turismo experience. And they need to bring back the rally races because driving non-rally cars in a rally race is awesome.
From Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything.
Tank destroyed. Always one crashed.
Welcome to Classic Game Room. Before I get around to reviewing the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers LCD game, let's talk about a good game. This is Ace Combat 4 on the PlayStation 2. I like to blow things up with airplanes. Therefore, I like this game. Welcome to the fictional world of Strange Reel, or whatever they call it, an alternate universe version of Earth, which has imported Earthling-made aircraft for the Battle of A.C.E. And you are the pilot known as Mobius 1. The storyline of the game is told through these cutscenes with some dialogue establishing the characters and the environment. It's a very World War II era inspired story, as you can tell.
His guitar. Our Yellow 13 bagged 3 more today, bringing his new tally up to 64 kills.
These are nicely drawn, the dialogue is acceptable, and it's kind of a sad story, but don't mistake this for a plot-driven game. You're here to blow things up with airplanes. It's Ace Combat, after all. This is widely regarded as one of the best games in Namco's popular airplane series, released in 2001 for the PlayStation 2.
What you do is pretty simple. It's a straightforward game. You start out with an F4 Phantom and blow up a bunch of enemies, earning points that you can then apply to buying new airplanes. Like the F-16, F-22, MiG-29, SU, whatever they are. I would say that if you've played one Ace Combat game, you've played them all, except it's not entirely true because Ace Combat Assault Horizon is trash compared to this.
Missile hit.
The fictional setting actually makes it somewhat interesting. It doesn't need a plot. Like, you know how these games are. It's just a bunch of missions that have no continuity, but they laid a plot on top of it. Interspersed with cutscenes, it gives the game a bit more depth and personality, even though it really doesn't need it. We're here for the action, and the controls and gameplay are terrific. I'm here to blow things up with airplanes, not make friends. There's a wide variety of jets to collect and sort of upgrade throughout the game. You can add new weapons, and then outfit your favorite jet with your favorite assortment of bombs and missiles. The music fits the style of the game. I think it looks really good for a PlayStation 2 release.
Target hit. Missile. Break.
As you make your way through levels in the game, you unlock new airplanes like the A-10 Thunderbolt, one of my favorites because it's the plane Cobra used.
Hard enemy radar spike. Bombs away.
I believe there's 18 missions in Ace Combat 4 and about 20 airplanes, and plenty of explosions to keep you occupied. It's a really good arcade-style flight combat game. And whenever I talk about or mention the Ace Combat series, people always say, oh, I love the ones on PlayStation 2.
The barkeep and his family were the real heroes.
The bartender is often the real hero. Always tip your bartender. I don't believe that Namco has re-released any of these. The PS2 games could make a nice HD collection. I think there's 3 of them, and they're all pretty cheap and easy to collect these days. The one after this game is Ace Combat 5, and yes, I'll be reviewing that too, because my man Daniel from Hope, Idaho sent these to the show. Thank you, Daniel. There you are on the map, Hope, Idaho. I hope they make more Ace Combat games like this. Maybe next time, in addition to blowing things up with airplanes, they can add some burning people with monsters and cutting them in half. Because what game wouldn't benefit from that?
Targets remaining.
After each mission, you can watch a replay and admire your quality flying and explosion creating ability. And what else can I say? Ace Combat 4 is a solid game, one that you should own if you enjoy airplane combat games.
Hard enemy radar spike.
And I'd love to see the Ace Combat series return to this. And these kinds of games would also benefit from being released on the newer game systems like PlayStation 4. They'd look great. It looks pretty good on the PlayStation 2. Just stop messing with the formula and adding those stupid slow motion features. So, thanks again, Daniel. If you like to blow things up with airplanes, or burn people with monsters and cut them in half, I recommend Ace Combat 4. Watch for my review of Ace Combat 5. Thanks again, Daniel, and I'll see you next time on Classic Game Room.
Mobius 1, Fox 2. Mobius 1, bandit behind you. MEC state is interfering with navigation.
Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. Welcome to Classic Game Room, where I have a decent action game with sensational sound effects. This is the original Bloodrayne on PlayStation 2. I'm gonna hit the microphone. Ooh. Ignore that tick. Or not.
That wall stretches across the whole town, 30 feet high.
I can see that.
So, from what
This is the first Bloodrayne video game from 2002 on the PlayStation 2, which spawned numerous sequels, a couple movies, and some comic books.
Quiet, baby. What will the neighbors think?
Starring Bloodrayne, a seductive half-human, half-vampire who spends half her time killing enemies and the other half moaning. I think the developers spent the majority of the budget on the sound design. I would have loved to see the recording session for this, with the actress playing Bloodrayne spending pretty much all day just moaning and making slurping noises. Really, guys? Is this all her dialogue? It is, isn't it? This is your basic hack-and-slash action game. It's actually pretty good, even though it feels like a budget-priced title. The first series of levels is gloomy and really unimpressive, so I'm not sure why they put them first. Maybe just to spend more time with the sound effects. Now, a lot of the guys that she attacks will shoot their guns off right before she finishes. I wonder what that's all about. Should I quote Yoda? You know the line. Control! Pass me the remote control because it's time to play more Bloodrayne. That doesn't even make sense. But when you start playing the game, it's kind of disappointing until you get into it. The second series of levels, when you start tearing the Nazis apart, is when it gets really good. But what about this made it really catch on? Because it's not the most groundbreaking, impressive game from the era. And while it maybe hasn't achieved Call of Duty status or anything, it's definitely got a cult following. Probably because of the sound effects. So even if the sound may be 80% of this one, the other 20% is not bad. You can attack enemies with your blade or whatever and pick up lots of guns laying about and then shoot bad guys. After so many killings, you can go into a rage mode or whatever it's called, and Bloodrayne even levels up, although it's not really clear what she gains. Maybe more moaning power. As you progress through Bloodrayne, she also gets some special powers like time slowdown, which comes in handy. Bloodrayne always has the advantage, though. Maybe it's her tight pants, but most of the enemies don't stand a chance. Only during the boss battles does the game ever get challenging. During the gunfights, she's way faster than all of the bad guys. If you're low on health, just grab a few of them and make some more moaning and slurping noises. However, I gotta be honest, I have no idea what the game's about. I wasn't paying attention to the plot. All I know is that the Nazis stole the Triforce or something, and Bloodrayne has to maybe get it back? I don't know. On her way to Hot Topic, I guess.
The Nazis are closing in on a lost relic with immense powers. We need more information.
Oh, there it is. They left the Ark of the Covenant in the corner. You know, it's got a good sense of humor, and it feels like a game that should have been awful, but it isn't. It actually plays pretty well. It's not a very good-looking game, but you can also pick this up on Xbox, on PC. And if you're into hot vampire babes, there's a bunch of other Bloodrayne stuff out there. A few years ago, I played Bloodrayne Betrayal, which wasn't bad, but this one feels like it has more of a purpose. Like the designers were really trying to establish something rather than just milk a cash cow. The music's pretty good at times, your special powers are cool, and some of the boss battles are interesting, but you're always way stronger than your enemies, so Bloodrayne just barely breaks a sweat, and that's probably a good thing considering it would mess up her hair. But the sound effects steal the show. On that note, I have a classic Game Room shout out and thank you to send to Tony, the owner of Gameplay Unlimited in Delaware, Ohio. So thank you, Tony. one's not bad. It's got decent controls, it's a good short playthrough, and it won't cost you very much. It's Bloodrayne, the first one, on PlayStation 2 and a bunch of other game systems.
ClassicGameRoom.com.
Welcome to Classic Game Room. If there was ever a game made that shows why you should be wearing your seatbelt, it's this one. Buckle up for Flatout. There's a lot of no-name, fairly obscure racing games on the PlayStation 2, and at first glance, Flatout may seem like one of them, but any game that lets you throw your own driver out of their vehicle and then have the car roll over them is a game worth playing, and the fact is, Flatout is really fun. Originally released in 2004 from a bunch of people you may have never heard of, like Bugbear Entertainment and Empire, comes this surprisingly entertaining racing game. Flatout reminds me a lot of the excellent Dirt Racing series, with good driving, good competition, and a race without any real boundaries or laws kind of feel to it. Drive it your way. Try to knock your opponents out of their cars by smashing them into things, or just enjoy the breeze as you go sailing through your own windshield and land on one of your competitors' cars. It's such an added bonus, isn't it? In fact, at some point I just became annoyed when I crashed and my driver didn't go flying out of the vehicle. Now that's just disappointing. There you go. Feel the burn. If you get lucky, you can knock your opponents out of their vehicles too, but unfortunately, they frequently disappear before you can run over them. But I tried. You know, it would be so easy for this to be the only good feature in Flatout, but the driving stands up to the greatness of throwing people out of cars. I mean, how many of us wanted this in the Gran Turismo series? In addition to damage, it was the main thing missing. While the game isn't very large, there's only a handful of tracks with different variations. There's a really nice level of competition in Flatout that progressively gets harder as you unlock each new series of races. And while every other band in the game seems like they want to be Queens of the Stone Age, to be honest, the music selection could be a lot worse. You can turn it off if you want to. And as you can probably tell by now, the game just seems to work well. Flatout can be found these days for just a couple bucks. It's the kind of game that was probably destined for the bargain bin, even though it doesn't deserve it. It's also on the Xbox and PC. If you dig driving games like Dirt or Colin McRae Rally, I recommend Flatout. I think you'll enjoy it. So a big thanks and classic game room shout out to Matthew from New Bethlehem, Pennsylvania for sending this to the show. After you've kicked ass in all of the normal races, there's also some bonus rounds like this. Human darts, throwing your body out the window, high jump. This is a game series that needs to come back in force, or at least be merged with some other big budget racing games. Imagine if these were standard features in NASCAR or F1 in real life. According to the internets, there's even a sequel. You know, there's a lot to enjoy about this game, and sure, it would have benefited from a bigger budget, more marketing, and more Soundgarden, but it runs smoothly, plays well, and the other drivers even put up a good fight. When it was new, it even had online multiplayer. Imagine that. The future. So a big thanks once again to Matthew. Flatout is a good, fun driving game, and this never gets old. Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. Welcome to Classic Game Room for Sequel Week, and let's kick this off with one of the greatest sequels I've ever played. It's God of War 2. What does Kratos have to be grumpy about when this game is so damn good? Running forward, 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 no, backwards, other way, switch directions, that way along the chain. It's God of War 2 from 2007 for the PlayStation 2. I am the god of peace and happiness. That would be an interesting game if Kratos went around hugging everybody, patting them on the back, without ripping out their lungs. But it would also be really boring. Kratos is out to kill everyone and everything that gets in his way as he seeks vengeance against Zeus, who betrays him by taking his powers and killing him, which apparently pisses off Kratos, who was already pissed off to begin with. So it's like a double dose of a pissed off Kratos. Not a bad thing, right? In God of War 2, which I consider to be the best entry in the entire God of War series. Although, admittedly, I haven't played 3 yet.
Hear me, fallen god. None defy what the fates decree.
I am what the gods have made me.
Unstable and really annoyed. Now, God of War 1 was a great game. This one just steps it up. The environments are bigger and better, the combat is challenging and fun and often varied, and it feels like the designers went out of their way to make this game bigger and more grandiose than the first, and succeeded. The story is also excellent because you really want to get back at Zeus, who's a complete dick. While the gameplay style is very similar to the first game and obviously has been replicated nicely through the rest of the series, it feels fresh and inviting here, if you can use those two words to describe a God of War game. Which I think you can, because while I've enjoyed the rest of this series, it feels like they were just copying this one, because really, how do you improve on this? Maybe God of War 3. Everyone tells me to play that one. I have it, I just haven't had the time. I wanted to get through this one first, which I have, and I'm extremely impressed with God of War 2. It's also dirt cheap these days. I'm playing it here off of the PlayStation 3 God of War collection, but we'll also see some footage from my PlayStation 2 game, where Kratos miraculously gets stronger! This is one of the few games I can admit to completing across platforms. I got halfway through on PlayStation 3 and then picked up the second half on PlayStation 2, along with a save game file from somebody who played this game a lot.
Do you not know who I am? Have you not heard of Icarus? It is my fate to make it across!
The cutscenes are outstanding in this game. There's lots of great characters from mythology that you'll meet, greet, and frequently kill. And as you know from the other games in the series, assuming you've played at least one of the other games in the series, you level up Kratos and his health and magic and discover new weapons and moves along the way. And it's the along the way part that really makes this game great because it's such a good journey. The levels and the environments are beautiful. The music is among the best ever created for video games. And I enjoy playing as Kratos level 5 on everything. That really makes boss battles just a bit easier. And it's a tough game, one that I'm not very good at. As action-packed as it is, God of War actually requires quite a bit of patience. Blocking, rolling out of the way, solving puzzles. Anyway, it was a hell of a lot of fun to pick up the second half of the game fully maxed out, but if you're starting out from the beginning, if you've never played a God of War game, I would recommend the first one, followed by the second one. So really what I'm suggesting is that you pick up the God of War collection for PlayStation 3, because it's the best.
You must find a way across to the island, Kratos, for there lies your path to the Sisters of Fate.
Why do you aid me, Gaia?
Zeus must be stopped. Kratos, the story of revenge.
It's the best way to enjoy two incredible games, and this one is just such a modern classic. God of War 2 is amazing. It's simply amazing. You know, I keep stressing the environments and how impressive they are, but the action itself gets repetitive after a while, and certainly after about 6 games. So what it really needs, what Kratos needs is that feeling of adventure, the journey, that you're actually going to accomplish something. It's called a plot, and this game has it. A really good one, in fact. So keep an eye out for this one. Good timing. If you see God of War 2 on PlayStation 2, pick it up. If you've never played it before, check out the HD collection. It's one of these games you really should play because there's lots of things out there that just need to have their heads and wings ripped right off. This review has been approved by Lord Carnage. Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. Welcome to Classic Game Room for the review of Global Defense Force, a game where we shout GDF instead of EDF, even though you're fighting for the Earth Defense Force in Global Defense Force, so... EDF! EDF! Well, that's one way to rid your clock tower of giant insects in Global Defense Force for the PlayStation 2, also known as Earth Defense Force 2. An emergency call from London brings the news. All have feared, Gigantors have struck once more. So, these were originally released as a budget series of games in Japan, and eventually made their way to the West, gaining popularity with the amazing Earth Defense Force 2017 on Xbox 360. This is an earlier game on the PlayStation 2, but it's pretty much, the same thing. You shoot a lot of insects. And monsters. Don't forget the monsters. And robots. Oddly enough, this was never even released in North America. I'm playing the European version on our PAL PlayStation 2. And yes, it's an amazing game. The only game that could do it better is Earth Defense Force 2017. Which I believe is technically Earth Defense Force 3. Now, if you've been watching Classic Game Room for a while, you're required by law to have done at least 2 out of 3 of these things. 1 bought a Vectrex, 2 played Truxton, and 3 picked up a used copy of Earth Defense Force 2017. It's a brilliant game, tons of fun, and this is like a rougher version of it. With less polish and less of the hilarious dialogue in the background. I really miss that. But we get 2 character classes here, piles of weapons, the familiar 5 difficulty settings, and a great game. With a single player campaign that can also be enjoyed co-op, split screen, with one of your buddies. So you can both shout EDF together since you don't have squad mates doing it for you. In fact, you can even bring back some favorite lines from Earth Defense Force 2017, like, "Do you like death? Then die!" Now, if you've never played an Earth Defense Force game, shame on you. Also, I would start with Earth Defense Force 2017. It's dirt cheap these days. Who would wear a miniskirt into combat? Really? One of the many things that makes Global Defense Force, or Earth Defense Force, so much fun is the wide variety of ridiculous weapons that you get. You start out really weak with just a machine gun and a rocket launcher. As you play through each mission, you pick up armor that increases your overall health and also unlock crazy-ass weapons. Like lasers, flamethrowers, guided missiles, and all kinds of other fun things to use to kill aliens, robots, giant spiders, and monsters, and whoever else gets in your way. Good times. I'm glad to see the series continues. I thought Earth Defense Force 2025 was almost as good as 2017. Careful where you fire that thing, it's easy to blow yourself up. I've got a huge, giant insect-sized thank you to send all the way to Christoph from Armstead, Germany. Thank you for sending GDF! If you love the EDF series and want to see an earlier version of Earth Defense Force 2017 or one of the newer ones, pick this game up if you have a PAL PlayStation 2. Or a way to play PAL PS2 games. If you like giant monster movies, Godzilla, Mothra, and mowing things down with a machine gun that explode into purple blood and guts, then you definitely need to play an EDF game or Global Defense Force. You probably won't make it through the entire game on normal without replaying some missions and getting some more armor and weapons. What I always like to do is play some of the earlier missions on hard to get some super cool machine guns and stuff, and then try the later levels on normal. But you've got pretty much endless hours of fun here with Global Defense Force.
Based on the incredible Ghost in the Shell TV show, this is Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, a 2004 release for the PlayStation 2. An excellent game that has many of the same actors that you'll hear in the animated series, as well as some extremely well done cutscenes, but not as well done as the actual show.
This is the Major, now carrying out mission. I'll come give you a lift when I'm done with my little errand.
Actually, I think Major Kusanagi looks a little weird in this one, but that's forgivable considering it's a subjective opinion and the rest of the game is so good that I don't care. The Jameson-type cyborg, straight out of the comic book. It wouldn't be Ghost in the Shell if you couldn't hack some things here and there. This is an action-adventure game where you can play as Major Kusanagi and Batou, two of the main characters from the Ghost in the Shell series, going all the way back to the early 1990s comic book from Masamune Shirow. When you play as the Major, you'll be engaging in some more complex jumping and acrobatic missions, which reminded me of Mirror's Edge a little bit. And if you know Batou, he's all about straight-up action shooting and blowing things up, while also hitting on the Major. While this is far from being an amazing game, it's a very good game, especially if you're a fan of the series. Primarily because the game does a great job recreating the Ghost in the Shell standalone complex universe that you've seen in the series, and brings a lot of the characters like Batou, Togasa, Saito, Ishikawa, and the Tachikomas to life in the game, along with, as far as I can tell, most of the real voice actors, from the English dub at least. This game is packed with wall-to-wall combat, as well as some tricky wall-crawling scenes like this one, where I got hung up for about 45 minutes trying to figure this one out. In general, the controls in the game are very good. You control the characters with the left analog stick and can rotate the environment with the right analog stick. And as you see, this does have optional widescreen support. One thing you'll notice right away when playing, at least on the normal setting, is that your characters can take a ton of damage, which is relatively consistent with this show. Very few things pose a threat to Major Kusanagi and Batou. And it's like that in this game too. You'll mow down waves of mindless enemies, and the enemy AI in general in this game is pretty bad. And occasionally you'll run into tougher enemy bad guys like helicopters or robots. The joy of this game is playing through the Ghost in the Shell standalone complex style storyline, controlling your favorite Section 9 characters as they kick ass, all the while enjoying a fairly good video game. While I am a huge Ghost in the Shell fan and have been for quite some time, that doesn't give this game an automatic free pass. It really is pretty good. But I think you'll get the most out of it if you're a fan of Ghost in the Shell, and primarily the Ghost in the Shell standalone complex series. Although if you've only read the comic book or seen the movies, you'll probably dig the game as well if you like this kind of game.
I'm on my way to the office block to try my luck there.
This also has up to 4-player multiplayer with the multi-tap on the PS2. Now, I would have liked to see this feature used more in the game: hacking. Occasionally, you can hack enemy bad guys like snipers, or sometimes just a random goon and use them to shoot your opponents and then jump off a ledge with them. If you like stealth action games, you might want to give this one a try, although there's really not that much stealth. You're much better off shooting everything in sight, and it's a lot more fun that way too. I should also mention that you're being scored through each of the missions and timed, which gives you some replay value, and there's some unlockable stuff when you beat the game. Of course, the real joy is just playing through an awesome Ghost in the Shell standalone complex storyline.
So that in itself doesn't really pose a problem.
Which means that the trouble is actually with those people.
Black man?
All of them say things like, stop the lies, tell the truth, and disclose the truth or you...
Plus the armor-piercing round from behind. He wasn't shot very long ago.
It's an improvement over the original Ghost in the Shell game I reviewed for the PlayStation 1, the one with tricky controls, but don't worry, there are Tachikomas in this game. And it's always fun blowing things up with them. Ghost in the Shell standalone complex of the game is extremely easy to find and quite affordable these days. I highly recommend this one for Ghost in the Shell fans. While it's far from perfect, it's definitely an entertaining romp through the universe of Ghost in the Shell. Vanished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. Welcome to Classic Game Room. While I tend to prefer Future Death Sleds and El Caminos in my racing games, I'll take some ATV quads as long as the game is good like this one. It's ATV 2 Quad Power Racing. Yeah! It's time to shotgun some cans of Miller Lite and headbang. It's time for ATV 2 Quad Power Racing on the PlayStation 2. I thought this game was gonna suck. Instead, it's actually very good. It says acclaim on the disc. This defies physics. How can it be good? It just is. There's few things in life more gratifying than shotgunning cans of beer while riding around in the back of a pickup truck, but that has nothing to do with this game. In this game, you're driving ATV quads or whatever these things are. They look very unsafe, but the game is really fun. This is surprisingly playable. For what I thought was just going to be another low-budget, hey, let's throw bikes or something into a game because people will buy it kind of game. And here it is, probably one of the top 20 PlayStation 2 racing games. I didn't see this one coming. I sat down and created my character, Killzana. She's beautiful and she rides an ATV. She's also getting her postgraduate molecular science degree at MIT, fellas, so watch out. Don't worry, she'll blink and respawn. She's a tough gal. This is like an interesting mashup of a decent off-road racing game, Tony Hawk Pro Skater, and Road Rash. And while the heavy alternative music selections are a bit limited, this could definitely use more White Zombie. It's kind of annoying hearing these same 5 songs over and over and over again, but the gameplay is great. This is a simple, straightforward, good times racing game. It's got your usual stuff, a championship mode, an arcade mode, a few different environments to drive in. As you win races and collect gold medals, you unlock new quads and sort of level your character up. There's no machine guns or flamethrowers, but you can kick your opponents off their quads or whatever those things are. Do people really ride these things and do tricks in the air? Like, that seems very unsafe. I like to not have a spinal cord injury, so bring on the video games. As you level your character up, you learn new tricks that you can pull off in the air, and when you chain them together, you get a big combo score, and then you get more boost. But the boost isn't really terribly helpful in this game. It's really not all that difficult if you're any good at racing games. It's a combination of just memorizing the tracks, staying in the lead, and of course kicking all of your opponents off their quads. Because why wouldn't you do that? While it's not a great-looking game on the Gran Turismo 4 scale or anything, it's a good-looking game that runs smoothly enough on your PlayStation 2. And I know a number of you have been wanting me to bring this word back, so here you go. ATV 2 Quad Power Racing can be found eBayisably. It's cheap and you won't have any trouble finding it. However, I did see that there's another game out there called ATV 2 Off-Road Fury for the PlayStation 2. Haven't played it, but I'm assuming they're 2 different games. Don't let the Acclaim logo scare you off. Trust me, this one is fun. And I have a correction here from a previous review. Tyler from Bluffton, Ohio sent VR Sports Powerboat Racing for the PlayStation, while Tyler from Denora, Pennsylvania sent ATV 2 Quad Power Racing. or ATV Quad Power Racing 2, while Tyler from Bluffton sent Smuggler's Run 1 and 2 on the PlayStation 2. So, two guys named Tyler both sent a whole lot of racing games, and you've messed up my mind. In a good way, though. This one also has 2 to 4 player local split-screen multiplayer, a bunch of challenges, unlockable stuff. It's a ton of fun for less than $4. ATV 2 Quad Power Racing. This one loses points for not having White Zombie on the soundtrack, but it gets points for being fun. And there's never been a better time to collect for your PlayStation 2 like right now. These games are dirt cheap. So invite some friends over, crack some beers, and crash an ATV or two. It's ATV 2 for the PlayStation 2. Now, if only it was Truxton 2. Welcome to the 22nd century. This is Zone of the Enders, a 2001 release for the PlayStation 2. Published by Konami, this is from producer Hideo Kojima, who you may know from the Metal Gear Solid series, and Policenauts. This is an extremely cool game with some great music that has some of the best packaging artwork that you'll find anywhere, and it's an impressive early release on the PlayStation 2, one that is still extremely fun to play today. In fact, the word on the street is that Konami will be re-releasing Zone of the Enders and its sequel in an HD collection like they did with the Metal Gear Solid HD collection. I can't wait to see how this game is remastered because it looks and sounds good on the PlayStation 2 in 4x3 with stereo. After some cutscenes introducing the characters and setting, you start playing as squeaky-voiced Leo, a reluctant hero who accidentally falls inside a giant armed robot. And what do you know? He's good at flying it, even though he whines and complains constantly throughout the game. I actually can't stand the voice acting in this one. Thankfully, the rest of it is really good.
Ready for combat operation.
I'll tell you one thing I did not care about while playing this game is damage to the surrounding area. If they were stupid enough to put buildings in front of my giant robot, they deserve to get blown up.
Please. I suppose you want me to kill again. Well, I want nothing more to do with any of you. Go kill or whatever you want. Just leave me out of it. I've got to be going. Then a lot more people will die.
Okay, so the dialogue isn't the game's strength. Thankfully, the gameplay is. Your job is to save some kind of space station thing from a rogue military regime, and of course you'll be blowing up lots and lots of robots with your Jehuti. You bounce from location to location, finding new weapons and upgrading your mechanized robot death machine. And even though you have laser beams, missiles, and all kinds of sub-weapons, you'll spend most of your time sword fighting with these things. What's not to like about sword fighting robots in space? Sounds like a winner to me. The battles are all pretty much the same. As you encounter groups of enemies, you can lock onto them from a distance and shoot them with missiles, and then getting close to stab them to death. As you play through the storyline, you'll encounter some end boss battles, which get extremely challenging by the end of the game. Where Zone of the Enders becomes tricky is figuring out what it is you're supposed to do next. You'll be finding access codes laying around or after you defeat groups of enemies that you'll need to use to unlock new weapons in different areas. If you play while using a walkthrough from the internet, it's actually far more straightforward. I think that the joy of Zone of the Enders is in its style and its satisfying hack and slash while launching missiles kind of gameplay. The game really doesn't change all that much from the beginning to the end. Your Jehuti is leveled up, supposedly, and you get all kinds of sub-weapons, but it's not until the very end that the end bosses become a real challenge. Of course, there's also a harder difficulty setting, and even a two-player mode.
We have shot down the enemy.
Even with its awkward voice acting and background visuals that rarely change, Zone of the Enders is an extremely cool and fun game.
We have obtained the Metatron Aura.
Especially if you enjoy robot space games like Omega Boost. Although, to be honest, I think Omega Boost is a better game. But I think Zone of the Enders inspired numerous games that came later. Don't expect anything like the Metal Gear Solid series, but do expect some kick-ass giant robots in space action. It's Zone of the Enders, an impressive PlayStation 2 release that's cheap and easy to find these days, and I'm looking forward to seeing the HD collection. ZOE, Zone of the Enders.